So, good afternoon, everybody. I am very happy to announce for today we have one very distinguished guest, and he will give us a beautiful lecture about the discovery of the Veda in the human physiology. And I would like to represent him. Zdenko, možeš samo kameru ugasiti? And so he is a doctor of medicine, Walter Moelk, and he is a general practitioner from Ayurveda and from Austria and the Western medical science. And he is the founder of the Austrian Society of Ayurvedic Medicine and of the first Maharishi Ayurveda Health Center for Panchakarma in Austria in 1986. And in 1996, Dr. Moelk became a member of the international research team at the Maharishi Vedic University in Vlodrop, the Netherlands, where he had the opportunity to work with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and Professor Dr. Tony Nader. And Dr. Moelk has developed comprehensive curriculum for postgraduate training and has over 30 years of experience in teaching Maharishi Ayurveda to health professionals worldwide in many European countries. And he is also director of the International Maharishi Ayurveda Foundation and Maharishi College of Perfect Health in the Netherlands, and has been involved in the organization of several international Ayurveda congresses in London, Rio de Janeiro, and in the Netherlands. And all his life, Dr. Moelk devoted to discovering deeper and deeper values of Ayurveda, and especially in the program of Maharishi Ayurveda, and making this knowledge available to all people in the world and through the cooperation with the health systems of different countries and educating their doctors. So it's a great privilege to have Dr. Walter with us, and also I'm very happy that His Excellency Raj Srivastava, the Ambassador of India in Croatia, is with us also. And this event is organized through the Embassy of India and the Ayush cell in Croatia, which is the branch of the Ministry of Ayush from India. And I would like His Excellency Raj Srivastava to give us address for this event. Thank you.
Yeah, namaskar. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good to see you, Yogacharya Miklitz. This is now a most awaited event. Every fortnight you bring us the wisdom from India through the European experts. And this is again today a special session that you have organized with Dr. Moelk from Netherlands. I'm very happy to be part of this and looking forward to hear the Vedic wisdom coming from Netherlands. And this is the true nature of the global partnership that we live in today, where the whole world is one family concept is becoming more and more visible. The Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is also a Vedic concept, and this is part of India's what you call universal heritage, that we look at whole world as one family. And in that context, this universal knowledge to be shared with this one family. And that's where I think sessions like this, what you are organizing today, will be very relevant. As you know that we are celebrating next 2 years as special years for India's 75th year of anniversary of the independence, which will happen next year in August. So in that context, such kind of events also give a lot of comfort as well as confidence that where we are in 75 years of independence and where we are heading in the next 25 to make India a proud nation in terms of what we are and what we are going to achieve through the partners like you. And I'm sure that this kind of session are always a awakening call for the people to see what is in it for us from the point of view of having a stress-free life despite the kind of challenging time that we live in. So I look forward to hear you, and also want to mention that it's I think we are 1 month away from the International Yoga and Ayurveda Conference that we are going to host here in Zagreb, and look forward to these kind of sessions in that conference also, which will be on 4th and 5th October, Monday, Tuesday here in Zagreb. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now I would like to ask Dr. Walter to give us a lecture about this very interesting topic, that we realize that we are not just some human beings, but that we are cosmic in nature. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want also to thank Your Excellency for this introduction, and also to Jadranko for organizing this webinar. And it's a great honor and joy for me to give this presentation with the title Veda in Human Physiology. Now, this at the first beginning, this sounds quite unusual, that there is Veda in the human physiology, because how can be that there are old Vedic textbooks and sounds and these recitations, these hymns are in our body? What have these books to do with our physiology? So first we need to define a few terms. We have to find what is Veda, what is physiology, and what is consciousness. Normally one says Veda, these are ancient books of India, considered as sacred texts, and UNESCO has declared it as a part of the World Heritage. And some say it's beautiful poetry or description of mystical experiences, spiritual insights by ancient seers called the rishis. This is the general understanding. But to understand Veda in physiology, we need another definition. So let's look at the word Veda. Obviously, literally translated, it means knowledge. And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has now brought to light a more expanded view. He says Veda is total knowledge, complete knowledge. Veda is actually the expression of the laws of nature. So the laws of nature are expressed in form of sounds and frequencies. And this is what we actually hear when we hear the Vedic scholars, the Pandits, when they recite the Vedic hymns. But it's a complete new understanding. And also it means that we not focus on the Sanskrit text, the translation, and the comments, the huge comments on the different aspects of Vedic literature, but focus on the sound. And we know that sound, music has very powerful effects on the physiology. And particularly these Vedic sounds are very powerful. But there's even one other aspect which is even more important than the sound. Now, what can that be? We have the text and the translation, and then we have the sounds. Even more important is the silence between the sounds. It is the gap between the words, the sandhi, the gap, and then the sound, shabda and sandhi. And this gives a kind of structure to the Vedic literature. We'll come later to that. But this is the basis also on the discovery of Veda in human physiology by Professor Tony Nader, MD, PhD, who has been inspired by Maharishi to look into the structure of the Veda and into the structure of the human physiology. I will share now a few slides. Jadranko, you have to enable me that so that I can share. Thank you. Now you have to enable me that I can share. If you go to my name in the participants and then make co-host or something, then I can share screen. Yeah, maybe you just, now it works, great. So I have to, this here. So I think you should see now this slide, the human physiology is the expression of Veda in the Vedic literature.
Yes, everybody can see. Yes.
Okay, good. Now, so this is the book from Professor Veda, Human Physiology, Expression of Veda in the Vedic Literature. It's actually compact, putting together the essence of the entire field of modern objective science, especially neuroscience, science of the anatomy and physiology of the body, and the ancient subjective Vedic science. He was inspired by His Holiness Maharishi Mahesh Yogi to look into the structure of the Veda and compare it with the structure of the human physiology. Now, when we speak about the structure of the Veda, what do we mean? We look at the number of books. There are many books in the Vedic literature. For example, Rig Veda, Samhita, one of the most important, foremost Veda, consists of 10 books called mandalas, 10 mandalas. And here we see the first mandal of Rig Veda, so the first book, has 192 suktas, or we could also say verses and chapters, and there are subdivisions of that, padas, and then we have the words. And every time we have between the word and the next word, there is a gap. So this is the structure of the Vedic literature. One doesn't look at the content of the text, but just the structure, the number of books, the number of subdivisions, and how many pages each has, and so on. And here is an outline of the first mandal with 192 suktas. In the center, you see the human physiology. And here it is the number of suktas, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, 192. And the corresponding part of the nervous system. Professor Veda could show that the 192 suktas of the first mandal of Rig Veda correspond to the 192 aspects of the nervous system, the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. And here, for example, you see the different let's say we have here these are now you can see this is the olfactory nerves, the optic nerve, the cranial nerves, all the 12 cranial nerves, and the corresponding suktas of Rig Veda. And also then here you see the suktas and the corresponding cervical nerves. So he found this amazing structure between the Vedic structure and the human physiology. And another example, you see on the next slide, is the comparison between the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the association fibers of the cerebral cortex. We have these 4 chapters of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. They correspond to the 4 lobes of the brain. And here we see one aspect. You see the four chapters with the 4 lobes: the frontal lobe, the frontal lobe, and the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the parietal lobe, and the temporal lobe and the occipital lobe. And they correspond to the sutras, the association fibers, because the association fibers, they combine the different areas of the cortex of the brain. They have this unifying influence, which is actually the quality of yoga. So here you see even the sutras are written here on the different association fibers of the cortex. Now this is, he went through all the aspects of the Vedic literature and looked at the structure and then compared it with the structure in the human physiology. The next is then in Jyotish, here the connection between the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia, there's a deep-seated nuclei in the brain center. And they correspond here to the 9 grahas, the planets. Let's see on the next slide, a little bit larger. So these are, and they are connected to the deep-seated centers of our brain. One could say these are the cosmic counterparts, which have their correspondence not only in the number of the 9 grahas and the 9 deep-seated nuclei, but also in the function. You see here, for example, the sun is corresponding to the thalamus here. This number 1 corresponds to the thalamus. And then also the Mangal, the Mars, corresponding to the amygdala, and then the Chandra to the hypothalamus. So there is an exact correlation between these deep-seated nerve centers in the brain and the cosmic counterparts. And he went through all the different aspects of the Vedic literature. And here you see the Vedic literature: Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yaksha Veda, Atharva Veda, the 4 main Vedas, and the corresponding areas in the physiology. Rig Veda corresponds to the whole physiology, and Sama Veda to the sensory system, the doorways of perception. Yaksha Veda, the physiology of all the processing systems in the body, and the Atharva Veda, the physiology of the motor system. And it starts here with a quality of consciousness, because this is also a key feature that Veda has its origin in consciousness, in self-referential consciousness. I will explain later this in more detail. So one could say that the speciality of Maharishi Ayurveda is this discovery that there is an unlimited reservoir of energy and intelligence within the physiology of everyone. And there are several practical applications of Professor Neder's discovery, how we can use these Vedic sounds, these vibrations of consciousness to achieve health, to create balance to the use of the reverberations of consciousness of these Vedic sounds. And examples of practical applications is the Maharishi Vedic vibration technology, Maharishi Vedic sound therapy, and the electronic model of Vedic physiology. So the electronic model of Vedic physiology is a full-scale model of Vedic physiology, computerized with thousands of electrons. This is a 3D model, which shows then blinking of different organs according to the Vedic sounds. Now, at present available is this 2D model where we can see the blinking of the different parts of the organs while Vedic sounds are played, while the corresponding Vedic sounds are played. So these are the practical application. And then you see here the practical applications. I said the model of Vedic physiology, then the other is Maharishi Vedic sound therapy. This is an online program, personalized selection of Vedic recitations, online streaming of Vedic sounds, which create balance in the corresponding area in the physiology. And another application is the Maharishi Vedic vibration technology, where a trained expert applies a technique of consciousness using impulses of natural law in the form of sound, which are silently projected from the most subtle level of thought. So the conclusion is to say that the structures of our physiology are the structures of our own consciousness. The structures and qualities of consciousness are expressed in the structures and functions of the body. And that consciousness is actually the basis of physiology. So this was the short overview. Just wanted to repeat that we have the sounds of the Veda and the Vedic literature, and we have the gap between the sounds. And in this gap actually is the organizing power of natural law, which constructs which is the next letter which comes out, then the next word. So one can say that, and Maharishi has looked at the structure of, for example, of Rig Veda in more detail, and had found that the Vedas have actually a mathematical structure. And this structure is the comment where Veda comments itself. And Maharishi has laid down his cognition in his famous Aparosheya Bhashya, which means the uncreated commentary of Rig Veda, which shows a sequential evolution of natural law from the unmanifest to the material creation. And it is understandable when we see that every sound, every vibration has a corresponding form. And So the form is a result of vibrations, and we know also from physics that everything has a vibration. And we know also in other cultures the great importance of the sound. And we see, for example, the famous quote in the Bible that in the beginning was the word. The word is a sound. So that means this word, this sound have organizing power. And as a result, in sequential steps, matter appears. And this also applies, of course, to our physiology. And Maharishi has described these sounds as the laws of nature, these Vedic sounds, responsible for constructing, maintaining, and dissolving physical structures. So the sounds of the Veda, which we hear, are actually a collection of the laws of nature. So they are not some old ancient books, which is also true. They are written down in terms of books, but it's on the surface, and they have a certain context. But the inner reality is much more. These are the innermost center at the creation, these vibrations, which are kind of, we could say, blueprint for the human physiology. Now we should also look, so we have said that sounds create the form. They are the basis of the physiology. Now, what is the origin of these Vedic sounds? What was before the word? And the answer is consciousness. Consciousness, self-referent consciousness, lies at the origins of these Vedic sounds. Now we have to define consciousness. Consciousness is obviously the basis of all what we think and experience. But it's not so easy to find. Somehow it's very abstract, but it's the basis of everything concrete in our life. Let's say 30 years ago, if you were scientists and would have said that you want to study consciousness, then you would have lost your reputation as a Syrian scientist, because this was not considered as a topic of research. But in the last 5-10 years, a lot of research has come out about consciousness, especially in the last year. Consciousness is now researched from many different angles, and many disciplines are interested to find out what is actually consciousness. Some say this is even the last frontier of science, which has to explore this. And these different approaches are from a biologist or from a neuroscientist viewpoint. Also, computer scientists are looking to that. Physicists, mathematicians, of course, philosophers and theologists and spiritual seekers try to define consciousness and to explain it. But there's actually no agreement on a common definition. This is very remarkable because it's such an important topic, but we don't have a common definition. However, there exists a very precise and compact definition from Maharishi. And Maharishi says, consciousness is that which is conscious of itself, period. This is the definition. Consciousness is that which is conscious of itself. Now, as soon as we say consciousness is conscious of itself, three components appear. This is consciousness, then the process of being conscious, and being conscious of itself. I want to show this on a slide so that it becomes a little bit clearer. But now I have to first go back to Zoom. So now you should see the slide, what is consciousness? So here we have the definition. Consciousness is that which is conscious of itself. So we have here the knower, the process of knowing, this being conscious, and the known. So these are the three elements of consciousness. They are all the same, but a slightly different flavor of the same consciousness. The knower, the known, and the process of knowing. So this is the three-in-one structure of consciousness. One could also say that instead of a knower, the subject, and the known is the object, and the process of knowing connects the subject and the object. But in this case, in case of self-referral consciousness, they are all the same. In Sanskrit, these are called the Rishi, Devata, Chandas. Knower, process of knowing and known. This is three-in-one structure of consciousness. And this structure of consciousness is actually a very dynamic process, that we have the Sanghita level consciousness on its own as one, and then as three, and this is a pulsating phenomenon. And this is a kind of dynamism on a very subtle, abstract level, but this creates friction, this creates sounds. And this is then the basis of the Vedic sounds. And then these Vedic sounds appear then in the physiology, or not appear, they construct the physiology. And therefore, because we have this three-in-one structure in our physiology and consciousness, therefore it must be also in the physiology, which I will show then in the next chart. So this is important for the understanding. Now we go back to the elements which I just mentioned, this three-in-one structure of consciousness. Now let's look how this looks in the physiology. In the physiology, this three-in-one structure of consciousness appears as the information units, the processing units, and the structuring units. Information units, this is the observer or the subject or the rishi. And processing units, the observation or the devata aspect. And structuring units, the observed or chandas value. The observer, the rishi, devata, and the chandas. So this is, we have started with this process of self-referral consciousness. But the same structure, of course, is in the object referral consciousness, when our consciousness is directed outwards. So we have here this basic structure, and for any experience, if we see something or we think something, these three elements have to come together. The observer, the process, and the observed, the object. Knower, knowing, and known. or with any sensory experience here, the smell, process of smelling, and those who smell. In the physiology, these are the information units, are the nerve supply, sense organs, and receptors, and processing is, of course, metabolism, digestion, also processing of thinking, and structuring units, the chandas, are the tissues, the cells, all the structural components. And of course, those who know a little bit about Ayurveda, of course, you immediately will see this corresponds to Vata, Pitta, Kapha in the physiology. But the origins of the three doshas is in consciousness. And this is the expanded view of Maharishi Ayurveda, which Maharishi has brought out, or also the input, turnover or throughput, and then the storage. And then Samhita level is when all three are completely together, togetherness of these three things. So we have the togetherness, and then we have the three. So therefore it's called the three in one structure of natural law, which is actually said that it happens simultaneously. It's simultaneously one and simultaneously three. So this is at the basics. And of course, this we can also see on all levels on the physiology, on the level of the DNA. We have these three levels of wholeness, on the level of the cell, and the level of the human body. And here, as I said, the three doshas have their origin in consciousness. So on the left side, we have the level of consciousness with the observer, process, and observed consciousness. And then this corresponds on the level of the physiology, ojas, which keeps everything together, and the three doshas. So these were the aspects of consciousness which was important to mention, and the corresponding area in the human physiology. This gives, of course, a complete new insight what the Vedas are and what the relationship is between consciousness, self-referential consciousness, being aware of itself, expressing itself in the form of the Vedic sounds, then in the form of the physiology. There are also very interesting further divisions of consciousness. Another structure of consciousness is not these three elements, but 8 elements, the 8 prakritis, which correspond to the 8 organ system in the human physiology. The prakritis are the 8 dynamic principles in nature. These are the 5 elements, and then the mind, manas, and the intellect, buddhi, and the ego, ahamka. This 8 is another structure of a consciousness, which has actually no structure, but still the intellect can say there are some divisions. And they express them in body as the 8 organ systems. So coming back to that, what I said, that we start with consciousness. Maybe I show it on the slide. So there is this sequential evolution of natural law. This lies actually at the basis of this discovery of Veda in the physiology. It's the insight that there is an evolution of natural law starting from self-referential consciousness, Atma, being aware of itself. This creates fluctuations of consciousness. And this are then the Vedic sounds, which have been heard by enlightened persons, the rishis, in their own consciousness. And then they have brought it out to the level of speech. So starting from Atma, then Veda, the next level is Sharira, the body. It's now more concrete. So the consciousness appears as matter. It doesn't become matter, but it appears as matter. And then extended expressions of consciousness in the ever-expanding universe, Vishva. So Atma, Veda, Sharira, Vishva. And if all this is lively in our consciousness, then we speak about totality, Brahm, the totality of natural law. So here is another slide showing the same thing. We have here the self-referent consciousness and fluctuations of consciousness, Veda, then the physical expression of consciousness in form of the body. And here also some other term I have to explain, svara. Svara means the sound. There are 8 basic sounds corresponding to these 8 prakritis, which then correspond to the 8 books of Rig Veda. Mandala are the books. And this is book 2 to 9. So the frequencies of these Vedic books for Rig Veda, book 2 to 9, Mandala 2 to 9, are expressed in the physiology as the 8 organ systems. And I think I should show also the 8 organ system. Let's see if I can show it here. Yeah. So here are the 8 organ systems. And the next slide, you have the next slide, the 8 prakritis, the earth element, Prithvi is the earth, and then the water, the fire, Vayu, the air, Akash, the space, Manas, the mind, Buddhi, the intellect, Ahamka. They have the corresponding expressions in the physiology. Solid system is, of course, the musculoskeletal system, fluid system, the renal system, and cardiovascular system, all what has to do with fluid in the body. Metabolic system, Agni, the fire, not only that digestion, but also cellular metabolism and also processing of all kinds of information in the brain. Vayu, the air, gaseous system, Akash, all kinds of spaces in the physiology, spaces in the joints, but also on the cell membrane, you have tiny spaces. So this is the space system. Manas, the quality of mind. Corresponding in the physiology is the endocrine system, reproductive endocrine system. And then Buddhi, the intellect quality in the thalamus, and also in the immune system, which has to decide between self and non-self. And finally, the ego quality is then in the nervous system and all the sensory system and the physiology as a whole. So we have this, as I mentioned, the self, Atma, the 8 sounds, the 8 prakritis, the 8 books of Rig Veda, and then the 8 organ systems. So the conclusion is that consciousness is the basis of the physiology. Consciousness, then expressing itself in Vedic sounds, becomes more concrete and forms then the physiology. And therefore, medicine, study of medicine should include not only the study of physiology, but also the study of consciousness, which is the basis of the physiology. Now, I want to show now a little more expanded view about what is called the unified field chart of physiology. This is a graphical depiction how one can understand this sequence about what we have just spoken, from the unmanifest to the more concrete levels of physiology, till to the society and the whole ecosystem of the Earth. Modern physics in the last years has been trying to unify all the forces of nature, the four forces of nature, to develop what is called a theory of everything. And here we see the unified field of the laws of nature, and below that in the blue you see this Shiksha, Kalp, Vyakaran, Niruk, Chant, Jyotish. These are the frequencies, the sounds of the Vedic literature, which we said these are the laws of nature, abstract, unmanifest, which are then to a process of symmetry breaking, getting more expressed. We see it on the next chart here. We have the different laws of nature, the strong force, gravity, and the electromagnetic field, and the weak force, the subatomic particles, and then the atom, and then the molecules, and of course then we have the DNA. And in DNA, we have this 3-in-1 structure. The structure, the objective value, the chandas value, and the rishi value, the information value, and the processing aspect, DNA repair. And this gets then expressed in form of proteins, cells, and tissues, and organs. So it's a stepwise evolution from starting from unmanifest field of self-referent consciousness, and then more expressed levels and hierarchical levels in the physiology, then the individual physiology, physiology of the society, and then we have the physiology of the earth, the ecosystem of the earth, and then the physiology of the solar system. So this is the understanding, Vedic understanding, how we can see that our universe is structured. Now on the right side, you see the consciousness aspect. Transcendental meditation is a technique which allows us to experience finer and finer, subtler levels of consciousness until we reach this state of self-referred consciousness, where the self is aware of itself, level of transcendence. And what this chart shows, that these are not two different worlds. On the left side, the view of modern science, and the right side, subjective approach, but they have the same basis. Either I call it unified field of all the laws of nature, or I call it self-referred consciousness, or Atma. Now here on the next chart, we see an overview of all the different levels of health on the left side. Levels of health from the environment, the society, behavior, body, mind, and then pure being in the unified field. This is a total range of natural law. And on the other side, we see now different modalities which cover all these areas, starting from Vedic astrology, then group practice of advanced technique of transcendental meditation, the yogic flying in groups, Vedic architecture, Vedic organic agriculture, then Ayurveda proper, daily and seasonal routine, diet, herbal therapy, rasayanas, massage therapy, abhyanga and marma, panchakarma, purification therapy, and yoga, asanas and pranayama. Use of all the 5 senses, aromatherapy, color therapy, sound and music therapy, Gandharva Veda, for example. The model of Vedic physiology, which I have just mentioned, and under Vedic sound therapy, I have already said this is the result of this discovery of Veda and human physiology, and meditation therapy, transcendental meditation in the DMCT program. The aim is to achieve swastika, to be established in one's own self, transcendental consciousness. This is the definition of perfect health. The Sanskrit word for health, swastika, established in one's own self, established in total natural law. And all kinds of therapies have to start from that level of consciousness. So health can be achieved not only from outside in, that we have to take some medicine or some surgery, which is of course sometimes necessary, but it has to be supported from within. So and therefore we say Maharishi Ayurveda is consciousness-based medicine. And here a quote of Maharishi where he said, what is the most natural medicine? The most natural medicine is the most natural state of consciousness. So this was introduction on this quite abstract topic of Veda in human physiology. But it was necessary to give an expanded definition of Veda, that Veda are not only the books, the text, and not only have not a specific meaning, which is also important, but more important is the sound and the silence between the sounds. And viewing with that view, one gets a structure of the Vedic literature. And then one can compare it with the structure of the human physiology. And it is amazing results from Dr. Nader's research was showing that these Vedic sounds are kind of blueprint for the human physiology. And I want to show, just if someone is interested to go a little bit more deeper into that area. And that is a book from Professor Nader, where he has went into all these important questions. What is consciousness? What is the meaning of life? And let's say, I'll do a screen share. This is his book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, Simple Answers to the Big Questions in Life. With a prologue by David Lynch. So in this book, Dr. Nader goes very deep into this subject based of all what he has learned from Maharishi. And you see on the right side the table of content. It is mind and matter, emerging science of consciousness, and what science knows about consciousness from modern science and from subjective science. What is consciousness? And because there's one view that consciousness is a product of neurophysiology. It's a byproduct of the bioelectrochemistry of the material brain. But he says here, consciousness is not only something which is very concrete and real, it's not only primary, but it is the only reality. Everything else, everything we see, hear, touch, smell, or measure is therefore a play or manifestation of that one consciousness. So he brings also from physics theories, he mentions freedom and free will and determinism. So he discovers choice and freedom. So here he's So everyone who is interested to go more deeper, I can only recommend this book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness. It's also available as an ebook. So it's now 1 hour. We have 1 minute before 5. Is there time also for questions, if there are questions? Or otherwise, from my side, I have bombarded you quite extensively now with very new concepts.
Yes, Dr. Walter, thank you so much for such a systematic and beautiful explanation of the connection of consciousness with matter, especially with the matter of our physiology, of our body, and how this connection is created with the sounds of the Veda, which are the expression of consciousness, of self-reverberating different qualities of consciousness when consciousness is cognizing itself on its unbounded level of its existence. And that level of existence of eternal, infinite consciousness is described in ancient Vedic literature as Sat Chit Ananda, eternal Chit consciousness, and Ananda, the nature of that consciousness, is bliss. And we know that this is something what has existence, and many rishis, ancient seers, they brought proof about their existence of that level of consciousness on the level of their own experience. And they found that our nervous system, our physiology, is just the instrument, or our nervous system, all aspects of the nervous system are just like antenna. Our brain is antenna to create reflection of that universal one infinite consciousness in its individual values as individual fields of consciousness. So that universal field of consciousness, Chit, becomes reflected through the function of our nervous system in Chitta. The Chitta is individual field of consciousness, where the center of that Chitta is Ahamkara, or feeling of I, our consciousness, our field of consciousness in which we are experiencing all different kinds of experiences. And the whole knowledge is to realize that Chitta is in its true nature Chit. But for that, we need to purify and normalize the function of nervous system, all aspects, and so that that cosmic intelligence, which structures our nervous system and which is at the basis of its function, which is expression of Veda, the sounds are that is expression of those intelligence, which is giving proper function to all aspects of our physiology, then our nervous system will give reflection identical to the source. And then we say, oh, this I am. This is that self-realization, or the real realization of the purpose of existence of Veda. The purpose of existence of Veda is to give us experience of self-realization. And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, all the wisdom of Veda capsuled in one simple technique, transcendental meditation, through which you can purify the nervous system and make it able to reflect that self-realization. And so it's a great privilege to have you as a scientist showing us very scientifically this connection and how the Veda is actually expressed in our physiology. And we can say also this old saying, Yata Pinde Tata Brahmande, as is the structure of our individual life, is the same as the structure of the cosmic life. So we can say we are the living Veda, but we need to restructure the intelligence which go wrong because of our wrongdoings. So we are able through our free will not to live in accord with the laws of nature, and we can create blockage in the expression of that full intelligence in our life, and then it will be distorted reflection. So we want to get original reflection. That's why all the knowledge of Ayurveda is there with the practical approaches which you beautifully showed, that can give us just coming back to our original, nothing new. Just we need to to restructure the function of that intelligence and to really Veda become living in our body. And then the life on the planet Earth will be Ananda, as it is said that everything is created from Ananda, everything is nature of all what is created is Ananda, and everything comes back to Ananda, the bliss. Thank you once again so much for your beautiful exposition. And I would like to ask His Excellency, Raj Srivastava, to give us also some final conclusion.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to the presentation and doing something parallelly, especially for the Yoga and Ayurveda Congress. So, it's always a pleasure to listen to such thoughts which actually make you stronger mentally. Because what we just heard, that consciousness and physiology are connected. And this is very important aspect, especially in this pandemic time, where many times we think that it is a physical problem, but it is actually also the problem connected with consciousness. Many of the solutions of today's pandemic people are finding by being mentally strong and consciousness wise, being more aware about what is happening than just being anxious and anxiety killing you in the process. So I think these thoughts, which are ancient wisdom, are very relevant in contemporary times, and they will always be relevant. But I am saying that listening to these thoughts at such times has a double benefit, not only knowledge acquisition, but also problem solving of the day-to-day, which we are facing right now. So I don't have any question. There may be questions, but I think most of the time the answers come while listening to these presentations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. It was a great joy from my side to present this knowledge, because also by presenting one learns more about it, because one has to express it properly.
Right.
And basic thing is to show also that these from India, coming from India, these things are not foreign. They are not actually not Indian. If one views it on the basis, they are universal principles, right, which can be applied everywhere. And this is also a great initiative also from Ayush and the ambassador to bring this knowledge in a way that it can be applied everywhere, independent of climate or history or religion or philosophy, because these are really fundamental principles, as Maharshi has pointed out. And Dr. Nader has so to created a bridge between these unmanifest abstract elements and the physiology, so that we can now see how the logic, why it is possible to see in the physiology the origin in consciousness.
Right. In fact,
actually, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was saying that, in fact, you're right that what they say, that truth is only one. There are only different paths to reach to that truth. And that is what comes out very clearly, that there can be scientific paths, there can be spiritual paths, but there can be one very important path of knowledge, of connecting the dots. So physical body, mental body, the emotional body, the etheric body, and the bliss body, that is part of our Vedic knowledge, also tells you that as a human civilization, we need to grow beyond just focusing on physical and mental. And when you go to the next level, that is energy and etheric body, or the blissful body, which is the ultimate goal, where you are blissful irrespective of the external condition. That is where you really truly harness the consciousness.
Yes, right. This is very well expressed. That only from that, and in Mashi has sometimes expressed it also on this chart. It says invincibility. Invincibility cannot be on the level of the physical thing. At deeper levels, molecular or atomic, are more strong, more stable, but still can be changed. But invincibility only on this level of a unified field or self-referred consciousness or Atma. And this is the basis.
Right.
Or the Sanskrit word, I'm always fascinated that the Sanskrit word for health actually contains the solution. Swastika, to be established in oneself is health.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation.
It was a pleasure.
So thank you very much, everybody, for participating, listening, and so we are very happy that we can have next month we have some other interesting topic, and we continue. Thank you so much, Dr. Walter, Your Excellency, and everybody. Namaste.
Namaste.